Welcome to Managing Love Intelligently. Today we have a special guest. We have Zoey Charif joining us. So thank you for joining us, Zoey.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Zoey is an author, relationship theorist, coach, and entrepreneur. Her area of expertise is helping people achieve their goals, whether that's in love or in their work. She spent nearly 2 decades decoding the patterns of human attraction, pulling from a background in criminology, data analytics, client service, and a relentless drive to challenge everything we've been taught about relationships. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We are going to get into a great conversation between Steve and Zoey, and I will be here as well, chiming in every so often. So I'll give it to you, Steve.
Thanks. For our regular audience, this is a little different because normally the regulars will know that Jason typically asks me a question or brings up a topic that I don't even know what he's going to talk about, obviously in an attempt to make me look as stupid as possible. Yep. But we end up having a more or less organic conversation, and Zoey has already shared with us that she's really open to that kind of organic flow in her conversation. So, I think, Zoey, I just want to say at the outset, I'm just so intrigued by your forensic background, and you're coming at this whole subject of relationships from a similar point of view as my own, but truly a different, unique point of view. And I'm kind of excited to see how this is going to flow out. So, everybody knows what an elevator pitch is. If you were stuck on that elevator with the biggest publisher in the world, and he said, "So what's your idea anyway?" What would you say?
I would say that I developed a tool to understand and articulate relationships in a way that can not only help build your own self-esteem, but also view your partner in high regards and eventually match each other in terms of respect and match each other in terms of how you show up in a relationship for the purpose of sustaining the relationship.
That's not bad. That's a pretty good first attempt.
That was my first attempt.
Yeah, that is pretty darn good. And so I want to ask, clarifying wise, is it something that's applicable primarily to new relationships and figuring out whether we should go ahead, or is it also remedial in the sense of helping people who've been unhappily married, say, for 10 years?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It can actually be applied at all stages of a relationship, whether you're single and looking for somebody, or if you're coming to, your 10-year anniversary and you're feeling unfulfilled and you need a way to articulate what you need. And you're just hoping that you and your partner can get back on the same page and love each other in the same way that you did 10 years ago. So truly all stages of the relationship, this is applicable.
Okay, so now I have to usually tell my listening audience that none of what I share is a guarantee of success, but it at least I'm purporting to offer information that raises the odds of success. Is it the same with your system?
100%. So, of course, the more effort you put towards a relationship, the more self-respect you have in a relationship, and the more you respect your partner, the more likely you will stay in that relationship. Our analytics back that. The only difference here is that we provide a way to numerically assess what that means. So what does it mean to have high self-esteem and high self-respect? What does it mean to have high regards for your partner, and what does a match truly mean? With that said, these are analytics, right? Although the stats say that you are far more likely to end up in a sustainable relationship if all those elements are in place. It's never a guarantee. Sometimes a mortgage will keep you together even though you're unfulfilled. Sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's an arranged marriage, sometimes it's something else, right? But generally, if you follow the framework, it should give you some sort of assessment in terms of A, where you stand in the relationship, B, whether it may eventually crumble if not checked.
So for our audience, can you tell them where can they find all this information in your book? What is it called again?
It's called Love Can, in Fact, Be Calculated.
All right. So is it on Amazon? Is it available in bookstores? Where do we find it?
Yeah, so Amazon, it's also on the Barnes& and Noble website, and if you live in Southern California, it's available at the Huntington Barnes& and Noble location, the Spectrum location, and also Lido Village and Malibu Village bookstores.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. Now, sorry, Jason, you go ahead.
I was just wondering a little bit like about the like how did you come up with the idea of love, calculating love? Like what brought you to want to try to figure that out? Was it like relationship failures, or what brought you to that sort of
Oh,
idea? Because most people just date
100%.
and date and date and try to figure it out without math or calculations.
Yeah. I mean, when I was 20, I was dating someone and I was very much in love, and this person cheated on me. So that's, I think, where I started to learn, like, how do I prevent this? And at the same time, I was studying criminology in college. So my laser sharp focus for behavior just shifted to love rather than crime. I'm like, I need to get it. So I came across this article that said you can't fall in love with someone unless they're a match. And it was a one liner in like a whole article, but that one really stuck with me. So I eventually started to ask myself, okay, well, what is a match? And I realized, well, first you have to evaluate yourself and then you evaluate your partner. So I essentially came up with you evaluate yourself on your top 5 values and how you show up for each of those values. And then you do the same thing with the partner score. As time went on, though, I realized that it was not taking into account attraction. So I actually developed a second part of the formula to assess trait preferences. And when you average out the partner values and the partner trait score, you get a total partner score. If that total partner score is a match to you are more likely going to engage in that relationship. If they're slightly higher than you, our analytics are showing that that's actually the sweet spot. So the sweet spot is when a partner score is 4% above yours, because then there's admiration. So yeah. Yeah. But to answer your question, um, 20 years ago, I had my heart broken. I'm like, I don't want this to happen again. How do I make sure this doesn't happen again? So I quantified love to predict it.
It kind of reminds me of you, Steve, in a way, with your divorce.
You mean, in what way? What do you mean?
Because I felt like you had that experience of being in an unhappy marriage, and then you're like, I don't ever want to do that again. And you kind of started putting together all this relationship technology and coming up with concepts and ideas like the critical incident debriefing and creating a life worth living. And you're like, I want to really figure this out. And I think you told me at one time you feel like an engineer of relationships.
Yeah, and I think this really clear why you're here today, Jason, because I didn't even think about it, but it is so similar. Obviously, Zoey and I are different people with different ideas, but there are a lot of parallels, and I think that's pretty fascinating. So I had a question. Usually, Zoey, how people, at least in most countries, I think, tend to think of love in the most romantic generalities, and they have a rather difficult time boiling things down to the variables that really make or break a relationship, because it's relatively easy to fall in love. Loving people fall in love, but that doesn't mean, oh, those two should be together, even if they're both in love with each other. Because, for example, one of them could be a drug addict, or one of them could be unable to commit to a lifestyle of abuse-free living. But what I wanted to ask you, when you share your ideas, including your book, which we're going to get into a little bit more in a few minutes, when you share your ideas, do you find people are welcoming them in general with open arms? Or do you find, because I find people are very resistant to thinking about love.
It's very interesting. I think the majority of people are very open to learning what I mean by love can, in fact, be calculated. There's only one person who pushed back, and when I say pushback, I'm saying that I had reached out to a podcaster. I said, hey, I've got this new tool that can be applied to relationships to understand them. And I guess this person was kind of taken aback at having a calculation to explain love. So I got pushed back, and that's completely fair, right? Everyone is basing it on their own experience. I don't necessarily assume my theory is an end all be all. I'm actually a highly spiritual person, but I do believe that it's just a tool like the love languages or having check boxes on steroids. And beyond that, I validated that through my analytics. So I think the majority of people are open to learning it, to understanding it, and once they realize that it actually applies to their situation or to distortions that they themselves had in the past, or they've been in partnerships where the distortions were present, the score distortions were present, it just makes sense. And I think, again, having the analytics to back what I'm saying adds a bit more strength to the theory. And by the way, sorry, just to back up a little bit,
Sure.
the goal here is not to make people feel like crap. The goal is not to say your relationship sucks and then the end, right? Not at all. The goal here is to first on your own self-confidence. And how do you do that? Rather than having one-liners or whatever it may be, and things that are just a bit more broad and principled. This is an actual step-by-step guide on how to numerically assess where you stand in your own eyes, right? And then, sorry, did you want to say something, Steve?
Yes, I sure did. I was
Yeah,
thinking,
go for it.
Numerical assessment, and I'm
Mhm.
thinking all of the people out there who are saying, "Yeah, but I flunked math."
Uh-huh.
So how do I do? I mean, is it a simple system? Is it something that's very
It's very simple.
very complex?
It's very simple. So, to analyze a self score, first you pick your top 5 values. So, Steve and Jason, my top 5 values will likely look different to your top 5 values, or there may be some overlap, right?
Mhm.
And do you have a list of that, or is that just something that they come up with, or do they select specific values that you
Well,
have given to them?
yeah, interestingly enough, so I had a list of values and I grouped them together for the surveys. So for example, I
Okay.
put honesty, dependability, and reliability in one group. I put knowledge and street smarts in one group, right? To essentially like kind of signify the same thing.
Mhm.
So yeah, I did that, but here's the interesting part. Just recently, I realized that the values that I had put in the surveys, um I wouldn't say they don't necessarily reflect what the majority of people do value, because we definitely saw some trends and some patterns. But I will say that for me personally, I started adding more values that I didn't even know were a thing. But when I was evaluating my own relationship, I'm married, by the way, I start to realize, there's something deeper here than the basic stuff like career, education, finances, family. Like that's all great, but I actually started adding more where it's like, no, there's like something else here that to me is valuable, right? And I also realized that probably means that like humans are just not a one size fits all. And although you can start with a set of values, my hunch, because this is what happened to me, is that with time you're going to start to find things that you didn't realize were deeper, like the deeper layers of you, of things that you need, things that you want, things that you value for yourself and for your partner, or wanting from your partner.
Can you give us an example of one or two of those values that you discovered later in your experience?
So I actually just did this yesterday, so let me pull it up for you. So another thing with relationships is that it's a very healthy practice to list out your values, see how you match up to your own values, right, and your own standards, and also how your partner matches up, because it's a tool for communication. Okay, so what I put yesterday, which I didn't realize, was okay, this is gonna be a bit weird, I think. Okay.
We'll be the
But
judge of that.
okay, okay. So I think that some people in your life are good for you and you attract good luck when they're in your life, versus other people where it's like, God, everything is really going down the shithole, right? It's kind of like that golden, what's that word? The golden touch or whatever, right? Like, is
Midas
some people,
touch.
the Midas touch, yeah. Some people have that. And I didn't realize that that's something that I want and that I value, right? I know it sounds odd, but I realize this is actually one of my deeper layers, because I do believe that some people attract luck and they project that glow, that warmth, that just whatever it may be to you when they're around you. So I actually put that as a value, that my life attracts luck around this person. And then I score myself on whether I feel I do that. And then I score my partner on whether I feel they do that, right? Another one was giving me peace of mind. I had never put this as a top value. I put reliability and dependability as a top value. Is that necessarily the same thing as peace of mind, right? Another one that I put as a top value, which I again did not realize I wanted, was respectful, but in other words, holds me in high regard. Do I feel like this person respects me and values me truly? Because just because I feel like they fit my top 5 values, it doesn't necessarily mean that I fit their top 5 values. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll project respect into the relationship or towards me, right? So this is a deeper layer of values that I just realized existed, at least for me. So I am curious, once I move forward with the theory even further, I am curious what people would add to that, because the ones that I put were very basic, like I mentioned, career, finances, education, and all of that, right? Which I do believe, like I said, there's been patterns and the stats that we gathered from that, but I'm just curious how creative people can get here.
Well, it seems to me, I'm just listening to you, that as you continue to work away at these ideas and work on yourself, that you've gone to deeper levels of your own personal spirituality. Where, I mean, peace of mind, it's a difficult concept to quantify, but we can talk about it. We all know what we mean by that, and we can even assign a numeric score to that. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, if 5 is the most peace you've ever had, how much peace do you have in your life right now? And people, so it's relative and it's subjective, and I get that, but it's still, I would say, mission critical in terms of having a great relationship with someone. Now, I have to ask you this, because this is another area where you and I are alike, in that I think human beings are the results of an evolutionary process that helps us to understand their needs. We've evolved in a certain direction. And the first chapter of your book is about the evolutionary process and our psychological needs. So could you share a little bit on the way you look at that?
Sure. So when I talk about evolutionary psychology in the book, it was essentially to validate that we, in fact, do evaluate our partners. So our primal instinct is to create offsprings, right? That's just what nature is. It's repetition, right? So as humans, as animals, we are very much driven by that. We are very much driven by, again, this primal thing of leaving something behind once we pass away, right? So per Darwin's theory, the strongest offspring, right, the strongest person with the traits and everything is more likely to survive. In other words, we are more likely to want to mate with someone that will create a strong offspring. And that assessment is based on how you have evolved as a human. There could be very basic things, like maybe women are more about protection, right? For example, in the analytics, we did find that women tend to rate men on their finances, for example, more than men rate women on their finances. Men are more likely to rate women on education than finances, in fact, right? So I do think that there are some primal instincts that are still there. So all to say, this theory in terms of you can't fall in love with someone unless they're a match, it's essentially saying your primal instinct is evaluating what the offspring would look like, would be like, and like passing on those values, passing on those traits. It's a very subconscious slash unconscious layer of the mind. Even for people who don't want kids or who don't think they're gonna have kids, that like muscle is still very much being worked.
So we're doing that, whether we think about it, know about it, we're still doing that. And we always have. So, not to be argumentative, but I have to say this one question. So, how is it figure out where, when you're younger, and let's say perhaps less informed, you haven't really given things the thought you do as you get older, you fall in love with a certain type of person. And then as you age, you realize, oh my gosh, I need to stop meeting people in bars because I don't like alcoholics. And so you change, right? And how do we explain that using that evolutionary psychology?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So obviously, as kids, our values and our intelligence and our ability to make choices, it's a lot less strong than our primal instinct, right? So what I mean to say is we're far more emotional as children, and when we're older, we become more logical, right? Because at that point we've experienced life. So the formula actually takes that into account. It asks you whether you're more values focused or more traits focused. So the less experience you are in life, the more likely you will be traits focused because you just want to fall in love. And straight up, that used to be me. I used to completely not take into account values and whether the relationship was practical. I was all about, oh my God, I feel so magnetized to this person. They fit, like the sparks were there, the butterflies were there, and to me that was good enough. Eventually you come across enough bad situations where it's like, okay, well, this sense of adventure that this person is giving me is not great for my life. I'm one of my values, I choose for that to be work ethic, right? And oftentimes work ethic does not align with being at the bar every night, right? So so that's where the formula eventually switches from traits focus to values focus, or at the very least moves the needle a little bit so that you do in fact take values into account. And I find that that tends to be the case for older people.
And those traits, do they include physical traits like beauty or height or strength or any of that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So when we are talking about traits, we're talking about physical traits, but that I grouped within one. So it was physical appearance, height, and one more, but it all fit that one category. That was the only category that I chose to put in there in the surveys that had to do with the physical. The ones after that were generosity, kindness. It was humor. It was intelligence. It was what's it like beta, alpha, all those things, right? So essentially, sorry, go ahead, Steve. I know you.
No, I'm just absorbing what you're saying and trying to integrate that with the experience of so many of my clients, male clients particularly, who admit that when they got together with their first girlfriend, their first wife, or their first 10 girlfriends, that what they were looking for, Zoe, was, is she hot? Am I attracted to her? And number two, is she willing to be seen in public with me? If they have those two traits, we're good to go. Yeah. And people get involved, they move in together, they get married with, at least the men with just those two traits.
I would argue that eventually they would not be fulfilled because we saw that in our surveys. So,
oh my God, yes. I mean,
yeah.
You're going to have an emphatic yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, they can go ahead and do that, but I think that's why the framework is so powerful. It's because you can think to yourself without putting pen to paper, oh, yeah, that's the perfect bitch. She's so hot. Cool. That's fine. But if you have other trait preferences that deal with humor, intelligence, generosity, and that partner is scoring low, you can go ahead and date that person, but know that eventually you will be unfulfilled, and eventually that lack of fulfillment would be projected into the relationship, and then she's going to start treating you like shit. So then you guys are both going to start projecting each other's crap because one person was unfulfilled, was not honest with themselves about the things that were lacking in the relationship, and were excited to have a trophy. Great. Now what? cool, now you get to be seen with a trophy. Now what? How's your home life? Sorry, I don't mean to be harsh or anything, right? And I can say that because I fell into those patterns before, so I think maybe that's why I'm giving myself the freedom to be a tiny bit harsh here. But that self-awareness is so key. The pen to paper is so key, and I'm telling you, if you think you're an 80% and you give that person a high score for looks, but then low scores for anything else that you find deeply attractive, like you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot. And then what's gonna happen? You sign papers for marriage, then what's gonna happen? What if you're the high earner in the relationship? Or what if you guys have kids? Right? Sorry, I just mean to say, like, you can avoid disaster. You can avoid, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Well,
I see, like,
I find
sorry, I know
myself
you're divorced.
No, I'm
I don't-
emphatically agreeing with you because America's earliest and favorite scientist was Benjamin Franklin. And he famously said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So your idea, if people could incorporate that into their dating life and into their thought life, that would allow them to make the same mistakes, but not make the same mistakes in terms of committed relationships.
Yeah. And by
They
the
could
way,
fall for anybody, but they wouldn't be necessarily signing on the dotted line and spending 10 years with the wrong person.
exactly. Look, I think we all get infatuated. With that said, that's actually a distortion, right? Like, I basically say, if you're infatuated, there's something wrong here, right? But I think we all fall into the patterns of just seeing that shiny thing, the shiny partner, and thinking, wow, I'm so lucky. But the reality is that there is something to be said about the top 5 values and the top 5 traits. If you're laser focused on one trait, the likelihood is that you will end up unfulfilled, and that's going to be years chipped away from your life. And not to say that the experience is not valuable, but if you keep falling into the same patterns, I would just check, like, I would just bring a bit of self-awareness here and just ask you, like, are you being fair to yourself, you know,
I had a
and
quick
realistic?
question, just
Yeah.
really quick. I was wondering if you had any resistance or for men versus women. Like, are women more susceptible to do this work versus men? Because Steve knows I have some friends. I'm from Chicago, the southwest suburbs, and it's a lot of issues over there. Like with maybe not
Chicago.
maybe
It's
yeah,
Chicago.
but like I have one friend who's in a relationship that's really like detrimental, like
Mm-hmm.
mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive, and he like is aware of it, but then they
Mm-hmm.
stay in it. And even I'll talk to him about some of Steve's relationship technology, and he's very resistant to it. He
Mm-hmm.
says stuff like, well, that's love, this it's just crazy love, and they make all these like ideas up, and he's unwilling to even do that work. So I was wondering if men, if unless it's just like my generation of men who were born in the 80s, and they just, because I feel like there is some sort of like stubbornness to guys, and they think they can do it all right, and women I feel like are more open to doing it. So I was just wondering if that is the case, or if you have noticed, or if men are actually doing this as well.
Yeah, you're actually completely on point with your observation and your question. Men tend to be more afraid to take the formula. I've spoken to a couple married men, and they straight up said, I'm too scared to take it. I would be too scared, because they're too scared to see what the results will say. It's almost like, I know that men cherish their relationships and their marriage a lot. I know that. In fact, the number one reason for male suicide is divorce, right? They feel like they lose their rock. They feel like they lose a big sense of their identity. I hear that. So I think what ends up happening is they know deep down something is not right. They know, they can feel it. But if that was validated, proven in especially a logical way, right? Because men tend to be more logical than women, generally speaking. Yeah, I think it would just scare them. It's like, okay, well, now what? So usually I have to tell the men, like, this does not mean the work stops. It just means that now that you see there's a misalignment, now you can take the next step to A, articulate the misalignment, B, you guys can work together. And I always tell the guys, trust me, if you're feeling this misaligned, she probably is too. So she's probably scoring you less as well. Again, the goal here is not to break up. The goal is to get back to a place of alignment. In fact, if it's okay, I'm going to share my story with my husband.
Okay.
So my husband
Maybe
and
we should
I,
check with him.
I'm pretty sure I've shared the story like 5 times and I haven't told him. So I hope we'll see. We'll see. He's probably like waiting for me at home, like, hey, babe, we need to chat. But so here's what happened. 6 months into our relationship, when we were still dating, we did the formula together, and I gave him 4% above me. He didn't realize that I admired him. And he also gave me a high score, and it was just really cool to see that, hey, we're a good match, right? We both feel that way. It validates the fact that we've been together for 6 months now. Everything was fine. We get engaged, we get married. A year into the relationship, oh boy, like we were not cool with one another. Okay, like there were fights, there were misalignments, there was total miscommunications and all of that. So I got to a point where I got a little fed up with us just not being able to talk to each other. So I'm like, hey, let's do the framework, right? I'm a relationship theorist. Why am I not applying this to my own relationship, seeing it just like spiral in the way that it did? Here's what we found. Where previously he was scoring high in dependability and reliability, 1 year into the relationship, I felt like that was getting chipped away. And I felt like he was not showing up as a rock the way that my standards were before. Here's the other thing though. One of his top 5 values was communication style and manners. I became a little too sharp. I was a little attitudey. I was a little impatient. And so as I was getting attitudey, he felt like not being a rock. As he felt like not being a rock, I was getting more attitudey, right? So we both understood where the miscommunication was. So we both started working on that. I started working on my communication. He started becoming more reliable. And then little by little, right? This is not going to be an overnight process, but little by little, we got back to where we were in our first 6 months, right? It took time and it took effort, but like that's what work is. Marriage is work.
So still working within the framework of your theory, you were able to ameliorate a degrading situation and get back to where you wanted to be. And I'm guessing even better than it was before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the dip that we experienced in our first year, no one wants to feel like they're failing as a wife, as a partner, right? Or even him as a husband, right? And no one, like, it's not something that you want to give up on. Initially, we didn't have the tools for that, right? We tried couples therapy, and I'll be honest with you, it actually aggravated our fights, if I'm being honest with you, right? So we dropped that.
And
And
why was that, really quick? I'm just kind of interested why that was
Yeah, why
aggravating.
are you attacking my profession anyways?
I am no. Hey, no. I think that it has to do with the style of the therapist, right?
Oh yeah,
I
of
think that's
course.
what yeah, and I'm the one who's such a big proponent of therapy. I absolutely am. Kevin is also. But I think what ended up happening is we still were not understanding each other. So when we were going into these therapy sessions, look, because they were scheduled every week, right? What happens when you actually have a great day the day before, but then we were asked what's in the last week been the thing that's bothered you the most? And then we're spending an hour like debating details, right? And what I felt was that in the end for us, it ended up just, I won't say hurting us. It definitely brought a lot of things out, but I don't know that we necessarily had the tools to then make the changes, right? So the communication was there. We were able to both let it out. But yeah, that was in my experience. But with that said, I mean, it's so important to have that guidance. I think not the majority, but a big number of marriages fail in their first year. I get it. I can see why. It's tough. It's really tough, right? And unless you're willing to put in your efforts and like just, do what you can to make it work, like I just don't know that you'll be fulfilled and happy.
A few minutes back before we got into this part of your story, you were using some strong language and you kind of apologized for your tone. But isn't it true, Zoey, that the reason you get passionate about this is because of all that history of personal pain? You had your heart broken, you see people around you getting their hearts broken, and doesn't that kind of impassion your work?
Yeah, I mean, my language and my tone in the relationship, it was fueled by anger. It was
Yeah.
fueled by unacknowledged pain. Um, and this is not anything against him because I also was not, I didn't have, I wasn't able to articulate it in a way that was calm because, to your point, it was so impassionate. It was coming from wounds. And by the way, not just wounds of this relationship, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
wounds of, I'm like in my late 30s now. So before Kevin, clearly I had dated and I've seen patterns in men and whatever. So I think if I saw certain patterns within Kevin that matched in the past the things that had me hurt, yeah, yeah. I think
Well,
it.
yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
but I don't know that you could do the work you do trying so hard to communicate with other people going through this if you had not been informed by your own personal pain.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
I mean, that old observation that the really good therapist is a wounded healer, and why? How could that not be true?
Mhm.
So for you to have your own wounds makes sense to me, because that would be, your life then becomes a template of what not to do, of what things can go wrong. And it's been the same in my life. I have the same experience with my own personal pain, but also the pain of my clients and the other people around me, my personal friends, my family.
Mhm.
I don't like to see people needlessly suffering. And it sounds like you're motivated by the same kind of humanitarian passion.
100%. This book, like the theory came to me like 18 years ago, and I started writing it 6 years ago, and
Wow.
yeah, and it was published 7 months ago. And now I'm starting to do podcasts, right? But all to say, when I was writing it, it was never a job. I would literally come to the office on Saturdays and write, 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 write. I put in so much money towards editing, towards like all of that to put it together, right? And like zero regret here. It's my purpose. It felt purposeful, and purpose to me is a natural medicine. It's like anytime I didn't feel well or I felt like things were not working out or whatever, I would just put myself in this book and just write, 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 and essentially put my experiences in there. And I think the biggest takeaway from this book is that cliche, you can't fall in love with someone unless you love yourself. It's true. Unless you have a high self score, you're not likely going to engage in a healthy relationship. So I think for me, besides and beyond the connection amongst two people and looking for a match, I think it really comes down to, how do you feel about yourself? Let's work on that. Let's talk about it. Let's work on that. Let's assess it, and yeah, so I agree with you. The all of this came from experiences, and those experiences were painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't see any way around that. So I have to ask, going forward, what is it that you think people need to do? I mean, going forward with their own lives, besides immediately going to Amazon and buying your book. And what do you think most people need to start doing?
Yeah. Um, at the very least, start with your self score. Evaluate where you feel you stand, and measure up to your own standards. Okay. For men, the average was 73%. For women, the average is 76% based on our surveys. If you're a man and you find that you're falling below the 70% threshold, I would ask you to evaluate whether A, you're being too hard on yourself, or B, if you're not pushing yourself in the areas that matter the most to you, i.e., your own standards, right? So that's the first thing. And for women, if you also, I mean, for women, the average for us was 76%. So I would say if you fall under 72%, I would just kind of check that a little bit. It always starts with the self score. It always starts with self confidence, because if you have self confidence, your standards tend to be healthier, and you're more likely to attract someone who will also hold you in high regard, right? That's what I would say for the first step to be. And then once you get through that first step, then wherever whatever stage you're at in relationships, whether you're single or coupled, happy, unhappy, it doesn't really matter. There are nuggets of wisdom here for all stages.
You know, I was mistaken because I thought for sure you were going to say something that I would have shared with you, and that is, I get so frustrated with people looking at relationships as if they are not susceptible to reason and logic. And I'm all for love. I love it. I love falling in love. I love being in love. I've been with my wife 31 years, and it's been like being on a cruise ship every damn day. And so I love all of that. But I just think life goes better with clear thinking than without clear thinking. And I don't think romance, a successful romance that is, can fail to benefit from two people who are actively thinking coherently, rationally about what's going on. So before they buy that book, they would have to actually buy into the idea that, no, it would be okay to be rational. And unfortunately, American education, this is one of my big complaints, doesn't allow, in our sex education program, we don't contextualize romance within relationships. We just talk about diseases and pregnancy and, you know, how everything works and what the labels are for the body parts. But we don't really teach the kinds of things you're talking about. And I think that's very unfortunate because that's really what everybody wants to know.
One of the biggest drivers of just being a human, in my opinion, is connecting with people, right? Not just friendships, not just socially, but intimately. So I do find it very interesting that our education system has not put more emphasis on that. In fact, when I was studying criminology, I was like, they need a program on just love. Like, so, like, think about how big that department would be, because then you're talking about biology, psychology, right? You're talking about like frameworks like these. You're talking about love languages, and I don't know that love languages was actually ever analyzed and assessed statistically, right?
Well, it has been, and it's been discounted.
It has been. It's been discounted. Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. I heard something to that effect. Oh boy. Really? Because that's a huge. Okay.
Well, it's not surprising because the theorist, if we put quotes around his title, who came up with this, actually did know science, and he had not been trained in any science. He was a religious figure who made it up. And it became very popular in the zeitgeist. And I wish that you would have as much success as he has had.
Yeah, thank you so much. But God, I mean, when you say that, I mean, this is just, I like try to validate it as much as I can. So hopefully there's truth in my statistics and analytics.
Well, yeah, you know, it's just, again, getting back to that idea. If somebody comes up with a really simple idea and it's got kind of a gimmick to it, the 5 love languages. Well, that makes it really simple, right? Everybody can kind of grab onto that. Your idea is, I wouldn't say it's unworkable at all, but it is more complex, and it isn't around dating. It's really about thinking and pondering and contemplating. Okay, but because the person buying into your idea, who has already purchased a copy of your book, and hopefully it's autographed, they'll be looking at the book and then, yeah, but this doesn't match up with my feelings because I know he or she is amazing and wonderful and we should be together forever. Instead of taking your analytics far more seriously. And
yeah.
I think really quick, I would say too on the love languages, like kind of like you were saying earlier, Zoe, how you thought you were this way with your values, and then you started coming to all these other realizations about love and like what what you needed. And kind of like Steve's view on love languages, I also see it's like we love people in infinite ways, and there's way more than five. And as you grow and develop and mature and evolve as a human and as a couple, you start seeing that there's all these ways that you love somebody, that somebody could love you. And if you are truly in love, you want to love that person in all those infinite ways. And hopefully that's reciprocated back to you as well.
100%, 100%. In fact, like a while back, when I was evaluating my own love languages, I realized that effort was not in there. I'm like, but I put effort, like soul effort. I put energy. That's not something that was included in the top five, but also how do you measure that? You know what I mean? How do you measure connection? Because that is my love language. I connect like from a soul level, from a heart level, from like is the things that cannot be seen, right? And that's something I only realized recently, that I have that energy within me. It's not something I realized that I was doing up until maybe like 7 years ago or 8 years ago.
Yeah, actually, I think you're developing language that's far more helpful than love languages. And I would encourage you to toss that other idea out and just develop your own, because
Yeah.
when you see someone is sincerely making an effort and when you develop that meaningful connection, of course that matters more than whether or not they brought you some flowers or did something else that's listed in the book Love Languages.
Yeah. And so funny enough, I used to also think that gifts was one of my love languages, but I realized if I was gifted something but I was upset, it's like, no, that's not going to do anything. I will only accept that gift if I feel good. You know what I mean? Otherwise, like, yeah, it just doesn't work like that. There's like some underlying things there. You know what I mean?
So is there anything that you'd like to say here at the end of our time together that we haven't asked you about, but you were just dying to talk about?
Yeah, I would love to actually. So, although this framework is highly analytical, there's a very strong spiritual element to it. The universe loves it when you're specific. So, if you at this time are scoring yourself low, right? Let's say a self score is 70%, having an affirmation of, let's say, a 90% self score, 95% self score, writing that out, even putting it on the background of your phone, something eventually, your subconscious will be wired to see yourself in that way. B, the universe will start gifting you things to assume that you are that 90%. So this framework can absolutely be used as a tool for an affirmation and manifestation. It's not just analytical. I do believe that the universe responds to it, and I say that because it worked for me. It worked for me about 5 years ago.
I just can't even add anything to that. Thank you so much, Zoey. That was
I
really
got
great.
one question too. I was
Sure.
wondering, like,
oh, but Jason can't. Yeah, go ahead.
yes, I can. Two parts. One, I was wondering where you get your analytics, just so, or how do you collect this data? That was just something I was curious about. And then I have one more.
Yeah, so the data was collected in two stages. One stage was when I was taking data analytics. So there were about 80 survey takers, and all we wanted to do was briefly test whether this had merit. And we did test that, and it was confirmed. When I started writing the book and I was very close to publishing, I realized I'm like, 80 is not enough to strengthen it. So I actually reached out to a survey company, and I said, here's a demographic that I need, because at this time I think it was mostly women of like an age group. I'm like, I need all age groups. I need these relationship statuses. So currently together, they broke up with me, I broke up with them, mutual breakup, whatever, right? And then I think, yeah, something with the genders, just to stabilize it, right? Just to make sure the distribution was equal. So in the second stage, I completed the 300 surveys. And yeah, that's how I did it. So it was always through a Survey Monkey link. It was 50 questions. All those questions pertain to self scores, trait scores, personality types, and also relationship dynamics, so that we can learn about what relationship dynamics look like for low scoring people, high scoring people, people who were currently together, and so on and so forth.
Great. And thank you for that. And where do you want to take all this? Like, where is your vision for it moving forward and into the future?
It's
Oh,
a
a
great
TV show based
question.
on your life, and some amazing Hollywood actress plays you, unless you play
You're
yourself.
so funny. Okay, you know what I would love? I do believe in the ripple effect of love and kindness. And I think I know this is going to sound so cliche, and I'm sorry, but it's the truth. The world right now, we are so disconnected from one another. And I think that we really underestimate how much love can make a difference. I know it sounds so cliche, and I'm so sorry. But even that one person who feels loved, appreciated, respected, they will ripple that out to the 10 closest people to them. If you have that ripple effect across the world, I think that we could see change. Okay, I think that right now, just where the world is headed, it's not healthy. And I think that it starts from within the home. If we're not happy with ourselves, with our partners, I think eventually we start projecting that onto each other. We also do not have good habits when it comes to purpose, when it comes to nature, when it comes to things that feed your soul. And then we start taking from other people's energies and start poking at them, and then they feel poked, and if they can't speak up or communicate properly, they'll poke the 5 people around them, right? And then we just have this ripple effect of negativity. So what I would love for this is to actually make some sort of an impact, one by one human after another, and for that ripple effect to be seen in the world.
So yeah, all you want is to change the whole world. Yeah, that's that
Same
one,
with
that one
That's
little
simple.
thing. That one
you
little
guys.
That's
thing.
simple. if it was, if you know, yeah, I know that's quite the vision, but
No, I'm teasing
if,
because I actually feel the same way. That's what powers all of my efforts. I don't see myself becoming rich and famous over the work that I do. But that's okay, because that's not what motivates me. I'm motivated by the fact that I have so much happiness in my personal life, and I want everybody to experience that.
yeah,
And I've been lucky to learn the things I've learned, and I want everybody else to be lucky in that way. So I love what you shared. It makes so much sense. Thanks, Jason, for asking those last 2 questions.
Thank you.
And I was ready to fire you today, but I think we're going to have to keep you. And
I know he sent me a link the other day about how AI is going to take your job, and I was like, this is like a passive aggressive warning.
That's funny.
And then one final thing: how can people connect with you? Like as far as website, social media, how do you like to stay in touch with people?
Yeah, so my website is Love Can In Fact Be Calculated, and you can actually view the analytics there if you're curious about what men and women's top 5 values, top 5 traits happen to be. If you're curious about people who stay together versus breaking up, you can go ahead and hop on the website and just learn more about it. My Instagram is Zoey Charif, so CHARIF. And my TikTok is also, the handle is at Zoey Charif. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Zoe. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, guys.
Great to listen
I had
to
so
hear
much
you
fun.
two talk about this.
This was good.
Yeah, very illuminating, very fun. Just really had a great time. So thank you all.
Likewise. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.